When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, combination lock. User, Lee13. Posted, August 2nd, 1998.
Billy, can you come in here? The voice belonged to my wife, Sandra, who was currently getting ready for work in our tiny downstairs bathroom. Her tone was the cautious one that usually preceded me finding some unfortunate critter roaming around whatever room she happened to be in. Over the course of our marriage, I've removed mice, spiders, gnolls, and on one memorable occasion, a possum, all of which began with the same sound in Sandra's voice. Coming. I got up from my seat at the table, dropping a slice of half-eaten toast onto my plate. Our varmint net, really an old toy that had belonged to our cat Twiska, bless her soul, was in the hall closet. I grabbed it, then jogged down the hall to check on Sandra, finding her standing opposite the bathroom's long mirror. Tall and slender, her long chestnut hair tied up in a messy bun, Sandra was wearing her dark pinstripe work slacks and a simple white bra. She was prodding at her abdomen, a concerned look on her face. "You've requested a rat catcher, milady?" For a moment, it was like she hadn't heard me. Then she turned toward me, taking in the net with a slightly annoyed look on her face. She shook her head. "What? No, it's not that. I thought I felt a hard lump just above my belly button." I sheepishly put the net down, leaning it into the tiled corner and wincing as it noisily slid down the wall to the floor. "What kind of lump?" She frowned and cocked her head before swiveling her stomach from side to side in front of the mirror. "I'm not sure, not like a lump, not like my mom. This was hard, but like rock hard. And it was weirdly shaped, almost like a shark's fin." Now it was my turn to cock my head. Sandy shot me a look and gave me a small smile. I know how it sounds, but that's what it felt like. How long was it there for? Her nose wrinkled in concentration as she thought. I loved that look. Finally, she answered. "I don't know, from just before I called you to when you got here. And you feel okay otherwise?" She looked down at her stomach, rubbing it absent-mindedly. "I think so. I feel weird about it, but I don't feel sick." I leaned against the door jamb, my head resting against the cool wood. "Maybe keep an eye on it, and if it comes back, I can make you an appointment with Marty." Marty was Marty Gallagher, our family doctor. He had delivered Sandy and had been the one who helped her mother navigate the system when she was diagnosed with breast cancer several years earlier. Sandy nodded, her expression cloudy. "I'm sure it'll be fine." 2 weeks later, I was laying awake next to her while she lightly snored away. At some point in the night, our power must have gone out because The alarm clock next to me was blinking away, a steady rhythm of 12, 12, 12. Judging by the sliver of warm orange light sneaking through a gap in our blackout curtains, I figured it had to be well past 11 a.m., and taking care not to wake Sandy, I rolled onto my back and stretched luxuriously. When was the last time we'd been able to sleep in this late? I wondered. Between staffing issues in my studio and the additional obligations which had fallen onto Sandra's shoulders after the university had granted her tenure, it seemed like our lives had become a permanently revolving door of work and social expectation. Having somehow managed to sleep in together despite all that, even on a Sunday, was a silent, stolen victory. I sighed contentedly, hearing Sandy murmur next to me. I turned over and looked at her. Also on her side, she had drawn the covers up to her chest, leaving her left arm and upper back exposed. She was as beautiful now as the day I'd met her almost 30 years before. Starting at her wrist, I lightly dragged my index finger up her arm, tracing a path between freckles and up to her shoulder. Sandy stirred a smile. I continued tracing along the ridge of her shoulders, finally stopping cold. The late morning warmth bled out of me as I stared down at a protrusion next to her shoulder blade. Gingerly, I reached down to touch it, her skin as soft as it had ever been, but beneath it, the lump, easily 1.5 inches high, was hard as bone. Afraid to press too hard in case it caused her pain, I ran the tip of my finger down the side of the bulge. Sandy shifted, softly saying something I couldn't hear. "What did you say, baby?" I craned my neck so as to better catch the repetition. The voice, which replied, sounded just like hers, while at the same time foreign, as if something were manipulating her vocal cords like a puppet. "She is beyond the second gate. What was hers will soon be ours." My guts went to water, but I tried to laugh at what I assumed had to be her bad joke. She didn't respond. "Sandy? Babe?" She lay there, looking no less peaceful than before. The lump on her shoulder, however, was growing, stretching her skin until I thought it might split. This time, I screamed, jumping back and out of the bed. "What the fuck, Billy?" Sandy's eyes were open, her expression annoyed. "What are you doing?" I was shaking, breathing so hard I couldn't speak. Instead, I pointed vaguely in her direction. At long last, I was able to choke out the words, "A lump, your shoulder." Anxiety flashed across her eyes, and she reached up behind her to feel first one, then the other. "There's nothing there." Once I calmed down, I explained to her what I'd seen and heard. To my surprise, it was the words she'd spoken which had upset Sandy the most, because they echoed a series of dreams she'd been having ever since that day in the bathroom. In them, she was being marched down a long, red hallway, its ceiling crisscrossed with striated stone and rib-like formations. The two figures leading her were pulsing, ambulatory masses of what looked like leafy organic matter, parts of them sloughing off as they moved, leaving behind gray-green slug trails reeking of damp. Set in the doughy walls to her right were pockmarked yellow-white doors, from behind which came pitiful cries. When the dreams first began, she was being led down the hallway when the first gate, a thick, nacreous wall, slammed down behind her. In a voice like a garbage disposal, one of the rotting sentries before her said, "This is the first gate, the death of hope, attachment." The morning she spoke to me of the second gate, it had been the focus of her dream. Another ridged wall looking firmly into place behind her. The now tottering guards, their insubstantial organic forms drooling a noxious white substance as they further decomposed, intoned the words, "This is the second gate, the death of the body. You are now more of this place than not." At a loss, I again suggested making an appointment with Marty to at least rule out any obvious physiological causes. Sandy reluctantly agreed, but when the day of the appointment came, she chose not to go, using the excuse that the university was hosting an important donor and expected tenured staff to be in attendance. We never had another chance to talk about it. Sandy's refusal to speak to a doctor about what was happening to her body frustrated me. I loved my wife dearly and couldn't bear the thought of living without her, and while I wished we could live the rest of our lives pretending nothing was happening, it was all too clear this wasn't possible. In a sort of childish protest, I stayed at work late that night, answering mundane emails until long after the sun went down. When I came home, I could see from the driveway that the upstairs bathroom light was on. I sighed, wondering if something new had happened and feeling guilty at the thought I might have deprived her of support. Standing at the bottom of the stairs, I called my wife's name. There was no response. Anxiety tickled at me, and I began climbing up to the second floor, first taking a step at a time, then two as my uncertainty mounted. Again, I called Sandy, hearing nothing. Now, running, I burst into the bedroom, hearing the wooden door crack at the hinges. Slashes of light from the ensuite's open door lay across the bedspread, and I skidded on the carpet, trying to change direction. Gripping the door frame, I launched myself into the ensuite to find her standing there, naked, staring into the mirror. Sandy? She turned toward me, and I stumbled back in horror. Her beautiful blue eyes had somehow turned pitch black, staring glassily at nothing. Even worse were the trio of bony knuckles protruding out from beneath the skin of her forehead, giving her the appearance of wearing a perverse crown. Sandra's lips curled into a cruel smile. Then her lips moved and the puppet version of her voice came out. "She's beyond the third gate. All connection is severed. Only the combination lock remains." Before there was any time to think, Sandy's body began to ripple as if racked by tremors. The things on her head swelled until the skin split, freshets of blood streaming down her face. They began a journey down her body, shredding flesh, muscle, and fat as they went, allowing it to fall away in long, stringy chunks. Soon, her intestines unspooled, sloppily yawning out onto the linoleum, followed by her other organs until only her skeleton, wet and gleaming white, remained. This too began to collapse in and on itself, bones cracking with gunshot-like reports as it fell on all fours, ribs spreading backward until they formed a kind of flat surface, the spine with its S-curve at the center. The blood, fat, and muscle arranged loosely on the floor began to liquefy, mixing into a fibrous stew which roiled with terrible agency. Like a life form with a mind of its own, this biological liquid flowed up the splintered limbs, coating them in a noxious pink slime which instantly hardened. My conscious mind could only accept so much, and I blacked out. When I came to, all movement in the bathroom had ceased, leaving what had been my wife's body looking like nothing so much as an obscene, organic altar. I approached it cautiously, my gorge rising at the violation before me. This was her, and yet nothing recognizable remained. The voice hadn't lied. She was gone. In the months that followed, on the days when my despair could be overcome, I would examine the altar. At last, I think I may have found something, an answer to the question of why her spine was left visible. The vertebrae are separated, turning independently of one another. This has to be the combination lock, but what does it open, and can it bring her back to me?
Subject, Beast in the Valley. User, altgunny44. Posted, March 3, 1998.
I've carried this truth for over 40 years. It's there in my bones, like the cold that pierced my fatigues on that night in Korea, 1951. We were just fucking kids then. Me, Jacob, and the rest of the boys in our squad sent to patrol a valley that wasn't on any map. It was the kind of place that made your skin itch before you even stepped foot in it. Dead quiet, no birds, no wind. Just the sound of our boots crunching over frostbitten earth. It was a place we never should have been, in a war we never should have been fighting. Jacob was my closest friend, came up through boot together and ended up in the same unit. This was our second tour. We'd been through some shit for sure, and if there's anyone I trusted, it was him. That night, he walked ahead of me, rifle swung across his chest, muttering about the cold. He never saw it coming. None of us did. Officially, the report says he stepped on a landmine. That's what they told his family. But that is a lie. Because I saw what really happened. We'd been ordered to check out the valley earlier that evening. Command said there had been reports of enemy movement, though no one could say for sure. Intelligence was always murky. Half rumors, half guesswork, but that didn't matter. We were grunts and had no fucking choice but to follow orders. The spot was about 5 clicks from our camp. The terrain was rough, the ground half frozen and uneven, making every step feel like we were walking across brittle bones. The trees loomed over us, twisted and bare, their branches clawing at the night sky. Even the air felt wrong, thick with something I couldn't put a name to. We should have turned back. At first, it was just a feeling, the kind of quiet that settles before a storm where even the wind holds its breath. The deeper we went, the worse it got. Then came the smell. It hit us like a wall, rancid, thick, like rotting meat left out in the sun too long, but there was something else under it, something fouler, like wet fur and mold and decay, all mixed together. It clung to the back of my throat, made my eyes water. "Christ," Jacob muttered, pulling his scarf up over his nose. "What the hell is that? Dead bodies, someone suggested. Might be a mass grave. I wasn't so sure. I'd smelled death before, but this was different. I gripped my rifle tighter. The others did the same. No one wanted to admit how bad this felt, and that's when we heard it. Low at first, almost too quiet to notice, a deep, guttural rumble like the earth itself was growling. It wasn't a wolf, wasn't any kind of animal I'd ever heard before. It was something else, something big. Then, in the distance, 2 pinpricks of yellow light appeared between the trees. Eyes watching us. They didn't blink, they didn't waver, just stared. Jacob took a step forward. "You see that?" "Yeah," I whispered. The eyes moved faster than anything that size should be able to. One second they were far away, the next they were closer, weaving through the trees like a shadow slipping through the dark. We barely had time to react before it lunged. The thing, God help me, I don't know what else to call it, was fucking massive. Taller than any man, but like a nightmare come to life. It had a shape of something human, but the features were all wrong. Too long, too stretched, too swollen. Its fur was thick and matted, caked with dirt and blood, hanging off its frame like wet rags. Its face, Christ, its face was something between a wolf and an ape, twisted and snarling. Its lips curled back to reveal jagged teeth stained yellow with age, and fuck did it stink, a putrid smell that made your eyes water, far worse than what we'd encountered on our way in. Hell, worse than anything I'd ever smelled before or since, like disease and death rolled into one. Jacob didn't even have time to scream before it was on him. One swipe from its claws tore through his fatigues. His flesh sent him sprawling backward into the bush. Blood sprayed the ground. The rest of us opened fire, the night exploding with gunfires, the muzzle flashes lighting up the horror in front of us. Blood was everywhere, eyes flashing, claws scraping. It didn't stop. The bullets hit, but it barely flinched. It moved too fast, weaving between the trees, lunging at us with impossible speed. I saw it grab Jacob by the throat, lift him like he weighed nothing. His hands clawed at its grip, his boots knocking against the dirt, but it was no use. It squeezed, and I heard the snap. Then it vanished into the trees, dragging my friend's body with it. But us, we ran. God help me, we ran. We didn't stop until we reached base, breathless and shaking, rifles still clutched in white-knuckled grips. When the officer asked what happened, we told them Jacob stepped on a mine. That's what they wrote down. That's what made it into the reports. We told him his body had been blasted into pieces and we couldn't retrieve him. But I know what I saw. I know what took him. Now, all these years later, I'm the only one left who remembers. The others are gone. Cancer, heart attacks, old age. I wonder if any of them ever wanted to tell the truth either, if they ever lay awake at night thinking about those yellow eyes in the dark. I've spent decades wondering if I should say anything, but in the end, who'd believe an old man rambling about monsters in the Korean wilderness?
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.